Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Art Journey Podcast, the podcast where I interview artists and we talk about popular art topics to help you on your own art journey. My name is Alex, and welcome. So, guys, for those of you who have been following me for a while, I'm so sorry. I've been gone for a couple of weeks, and I didn't even announce it. What happened was a lot of things happened. I moved apartments earlier this year. And by earlier this year, I mean like 3 weeks ago. And it happened a little earlier than we had anticipated. So I just had no time to plan things out. And, I just had to pack, move, and get things going. So, I just couldn't record. I felt so bad. And then right after we finished the actual move, actually moving our stuff to this apartment, I got really bad cold, which you might still be able to hear, but no worries, guys. I'm better. I'm here. I'm back. I'm not going anywhere. And just thank you so much for sticking with me. And if you're new, thanks for checking me out. So today's interview is interesting. It's an interview with someone I met through a community of another podcast that I listen to called Don't Keep Your Day Job by Cathy HellerThe Saavy. And it's just really cool talking to this person because she's in a similar boat as me. So she's a person who is not working full-time in art yet, but that's what she wants to do. And she's way ahead of the curve on where I'm at. She's actually out there hustling and selling prints and getting her stuff in galleries, and it's just really cool to hear about someone who's in the same boat but a little bit ahead, because it lets you see the possibilities. So her name is Nicolette Leigh, and she does this really cool, it's so hard to describe art over podcasts, but she does really vibrant art that kind of tiptoes the line between abstract and portraits and landscape and stuff like that. It's really cool. You got to check it out. But yeah, she's going to share her story on where she's at in her art journey right now, as a person who is wanting to pursue art as a career full time, but not quite there yet. I feel like she's on the cusp of it, though. I can feel it. So without further ado, I know that you want to hear her story as much as you want me to, quit doing these long intros. But yeah, and without any further ado, here is Nicolette Leigh. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. So I was actually looking at your website earlier, and you have such gorgeous, unique art.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of work that is very different from what we're seeing right now out there in the illustration and art world, which is very refreshing to see.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and so have you been doing art since you were little? Most artists do, but what has your experience been growing up with art?
Yeah, it was off and on as a very young child. I think I really started as a teen or early 20s, being more serious about it. But definitely, when I was in second grade, I won an art contest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was the first time when I was like, oh, there's something to this, and I love it. And so, but it was kind of hit or miss after that, just off and on, not really feeling like per se I was an artist exactly, but my mother, she painted murals, and she taught me a lot as a kid. And yeah, I did a lot of dancing, was my main art form.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting.
Mostly just in my yard.
Yeah. It's so cool, though, that you said that your mom was kind of in a creative atmosphere. It's funny because now that I've started interviewing people, I've found a few people who say that they had art influence in their life, but it's not super common. So did she influence you a lot when it comes to art?
I would say so. She was always involved in some sort of painting project or job or design work. Yeah. So I I would watch her paint, and I probably picked up more than I even realized from that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so, you said that your art, it was very on again, off again as far as growing up. So,
Yeah.
when would you say you finally decided, okay, I'm going to take this seriously and this is what I want to do?
I feel like there were a few stages to that. The first time I felt that was upon returning from a trip to Australia. Um,
Mm.
I in At home I was working at an art store, and they gave me leave for 3 months to go to Australia. So when
Wow.
I came back, like, they had no clue when I was coming back. So I sort of took advantage of that time to have a little sabbatical at home and start working. So I made a ton of art in like a 2-week period. Um,
Mhm.
just hiding out in my teenage bedroom at my mom's, and finally she caught on and was like, are you going back to work soon? Because I had to pay rent at that point. I was,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'd say that was the first time I got serious, and I started understanding working in a series.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I think uh, the next stage was in college. I was pursuing geology, and I just felt uneasy, like something was missing.
Yeah.
And I knew it was art. So I decided to switch at a certain point and my major to art. That was probably the next phase of getting serious. And
Yeah.
then finally, just a year ago, like, I for several years I've been listening to art podcasts and reading art marketing. So I feel most recently I've gotten really serious about it as a business and learning all the skills I need to have as a business person, which, as a teenager I didn't realize like all that went with that.
Oh, yeah. I feel like most people, when they kind of start delving into the idea of doing art professionally and independently, they don't realize like all the tiny little hats that you have to wear
Yeah.
when you're an independent artist.
Mhm. Yes.
So, you went to school for geology, which is
Uh-huh.
really interesting. That's so like outside of the realm. Do you
Yeah.
feel like what happened in there particularly that kind of made you think I need to switch?
Hmm. Uh, I was taking physics, and I loved physics, but I got a D, even though I loved it. And
Ah.
it it may have been because I was also helped start a roller derby league, um,
Whoa.
and and that was taking a lot of my time, and I loved the creativity that allowed for, um,
Mhm.
and I just felt like, I was, I don't know, that just the combination of all that, I think pushed me to follow my dreams more than what I felt society was telling me, like, get a steady job, something that will pay the bills. But
Totally. I
yeah,
feel like a lot of people can relate to that pressure.
yeah. Hmm.
And so when you did kind of finally decide to leave that and start pursuing art, what were kind of the first steps you took towards that?
You mean towards
Towards
change?
like changing, I guess, your career path,
Mhm.
either in college or out of college. Like, what were kind of your first steps to kind of creating this roadmap to creating a creative career?
Hmm. I don't think I had any plan really. Yes.
So, so like you said, you did switch your your major to art
Yeah.
after geology, right?
Hmm.
And then, were you did you complete a degree in art
Oh,
or did
yes. Sorry. Yes, I actually majored in sculpture. Um,
Oh, fun.
yeah, and then I love sculpture. I have a few mixed media. It involves painting and a 3D element, but
Mhm.
um, so that stuck with me a little bit. But I've definitely always felt more like a painter. I think I just wanted to push myself a little bit into the three-dimensional world just to see. But I was really loving little busts, making busts of
Mm-hmm.
figures, characters, creatures that I made up in clay. And it
Mm-hmm.
kind of reminded me of my illustration that I was making after Australia. It was large illustrative paintings that I was making of characters. So I think that is eventually why I chose sculpture when I decided to switch.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's really interesting because I feel like I can kind of see that influence in your art.
Sculptural, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually do encourage a lot of times for artists who work in 2D to try to pick up some skills in 3D elements because I feel
Hmm.
like it exercises different parts of your brain.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally could see that. Hmm.
Yeah, especially like it develops your understanding of like figure and form because
Yeah.
when you're drawing 2D, really what you're doing is you're kind of tricking the eye into thinking something is 3D.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes when you only know how to trick the eye, you start losing that understanding of actual form, which is
Hmm.
why things like figure classes are so important, and
Hmm.
also if you can do something sculptural or just something like some sort of craft that is three-dimensional, I feel like it really kind of reinforces those skills.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah.
So your art, if anyone hasn't seen it, her art, like I'm opened up, it's very unique. There's like a lot of use of interesting bold colors
Mhm.
and a lot of interesting form. And I feel like your style, if once someone's seen it, I feel like they can recognize it as being your own, which is
That's
something very hard to develop.
that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty major goal for artists. Every artist is finding your style. And sometimes I'll look and I'm like, I don't know. I have to ask other people. So it's great to hear you say that. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. It is very unique. And I feel like after getting a grasp of it and seeing a few of your pieces, I feel like if I was presented with a new piece and nobody told me it was by
Mhm.
you, I think I would know.
Awesome.
And so, what kind of went into developing that style? Did it always look like that?
No. Um, it's funny. I took a workshop with Elena Hennessy
Okay.
at the beginning of this year. It's actually a year-long course called A Year of
Wow.
Painting. She releases a monthly assignment, and I feel like from her very first assignment, it reminded me of what I was doing post Australia in my bedroom, and which I had left behind during art school, um,
Hmm.
even in my 2D courses. And it felt so good to like reconnect with that way of working. And I felt like her course sort of gave me permission to go back to that thinking and process,
Yeah.
which like that's really when I developed my style back then. And then I left it behind and was searching for a style when I had already really had it and I
Yeah.
was neglecting it or for some reason just not paying enough attention or like um, giving it any
Like attention.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And so taking her course really invigorated my work, made it more fulfilling and more consistent this year. And so it was really great to have taken her course, but unfortunately I sort of left it behind because it just sent me like on a roll, like going forward with
Yeah.
my own thing. So yeah, I'm trying to catch up with it now, but yeah,
But it's cool. It sounds like what this course did for you was it kind of gave you a road to follow that enabled you to further discover your potential in art.
yeah, it felt kind of like permission to use my voice.
Mhm.
Um, Voice has always been a thing I've struggled with, like literally, and in my art, like second guessing myself, and um, yeah. So I've yeah.
So do you have any advice kind of for people out there who are in a place like you were where they felt like they still needed to develop their style to kind of find a way to learn that? Like, do you have any tips that you followed to develop your own style?
Um, I this sounds really easy but I mean it's not, but you just have to keep working and
Mhm.
experimenting. Um, I would say know your influences, know what art you like and pull what interests you from it. Copy it for a while if I mean, not totally, but pull elements from it and
Yeah.
um I don't know, just keep pushing it further and notice what you notice, which is one of my favorite quotes
Mm.
by Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah.
um, and basically, in a nutshell, just keep going and experimenting, and you'll get
Yeah.
there eventually. And if you have something that you're doing over and over, look at it more closely and see what you can pull out of it, and ask yourself why you think it is the way it is, and see how you can push that further. And yeah, by pushing, it could be with material or the style of line, your process. Do you need to loosen up or get tighter? There's so many ways you could try to find a style, or uncover your voice or style. Yeah, so I don't
Yeah,
know if I
that's
answered
really
that.
yeah, no, that's really good advice. And also some adding to something you mentioned earlier, another a bit of advice is not to fight the style you have.
Right.
Cuz like you
Exactly.
said, you had already kind of discovered a similar style in your past and you thought you needed to find your style, but you had already found it.
Right.
And I feel like that happens to a lot of people where they either don't like their style or they cannot see the unique qualities in their own art that hint that their style is there.
Mhm.
And I think that's very important. You need to kind of just embrace what your style looks like because it's your hands tend to just create things in a certain way, and it's way easier for you not to fight it. And
Right.
once you start accepting your style and your way of drawing for what it is, I feel like that's when you can really start pushing boundaries and making good stuff.
Yes, exactly. And in my case, I think I was imposing on myself what I thought other people considered good art or what people expected of me. And so that might have been part of leaving my original style behind. Um, so I don't know. I think another quote who I can't remember who I'm stealing this from, but was it's none of your business what other people think of you.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's been really helpful the past couple years. Just relentlessly charging forward with what my intuition is telling me to act upon in my art. So
Yeah, no, that's really good, especially in this day and age where a big part of having a career in art means having a social media presence.
mhm.
And so you're always hearing what people think about you because
Yes.
people have no filters in the comments.
Right. Mhm.
And I feel like it's very important for you to kind of, like the quote says, what they think of you is none of your business. And you kind of just have to brush it off, like take the constructive parts and apply them, but then
Mhm.
just ignore everything else because honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what other people think to a certain extent
Mhm.
because people will like your art because it is your personal point of view. And the second you start robbing yourself of that and start getting too influenced by what people expect of you, that's going to be a little bit rocky.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And so, what have you been up to with your art? What are you doing with it right now?
Um, I I have a series on paper of I'm calling it my pareidolia series, which references a phenomena in the brain where we will look at random patterns like in a wood floor, tree bark, grass texture, and
Oh,
clouds.
wow.
And
Didn't know
we'll,
that had a name.
oh yeah, like finding images in those textures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm forgetting the etymology of it, but uh, yeah, it's pareidolia. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. But um, so I'll lay down layers of really watery ink on paper or canvas or wood. It's mostly been paper lately, and so I'll then let it dry and come back with fresh eyes and stare at it a bit and see what pops out. And then, usually with drawing materials, I'll bring out that image, drawing and a little bit of painting.
Wow, that's such a cool idea.
Thank you. Yeah. That's kind of what I was doing a long time ago as well. And I've got a few other projects going as well. I love to do portraits too, which is kind of
Mm.
totally different from
Yeah.
my personal work right now. But I'm doing portraits for this coffee startup. My friend, she's featuring women coffee growers, and so I'm drawing portraits of all the growers for her bags, which that's fun.
Yeah, that sounds super fun. So it sounds like do you do a lot of collaborative work in your career?
No, I wouldn't say a lot.
Mhm.
I've done a few logos and like commercial jobs,
Mhm.
but I mostly focus on personal work.
Yeah, so how has your personal career in art been like for the people listening right now? What has been kind of your career journey as far as creative work goes?
So I would say like I would mostly make work to hang um, at fairs, festivals,
Mhm.
in galleries. Um, that's what I've been focusing on, especially this year. And also, I've been creating prints a lot this year, where previously I hadn't had that to offer for like the lower priced any of
Yeah.
the things. And so I've been sending those out to try to gain wholesale accounts and
Mhm.
consignment, and also to magazines for for publishing. And yeah, so I keep researching those sort of things,
Mhm.
all the hats that go along with that. It's crazy, but
I know.
but it's fun. It can be fun. I'm enjoying it, and so that's where I'm at this year.
Mhm.
Uh,
And what about before? Like, how did you kind of begin your art
mhm.
journey, like your art career?
Yeah, it's really random. I'm not a full time artist right now. It's
Mhm.
I'm that's always been the goal. I mean, since I decided, and so I'm still working on that. And so I think it's been just really random. I say in the cracks because I have a daughter, and I got pregnant right out of college, so
Mhm.
that took a lot of my time. But as soon
Yeah,
as
I bet.
yeah, as soon as she hit kindergarten, I was way more focused. So to answer your question, I think it would be like just make as much as I can, and then scour opportunities that fit whatever I made in the cracks of my life. uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, just one step at a time. I don't know if that's the best answer to your question, but
No, that's good. It's really good to get this perspective because I feel like a lot of people listening are probably in our same boat where we want to make art our full time, but we're still kind of in that stage of figuring it out.
yes.
But some people, unlike you, are afraid to even begin because I feel like a lot of people think it's all or nothing. It's either I have a full time job in art or
Yeah,
it's not worth it, right?
right. I was like that at a certain point. Yeah, I think I let it really get to me that I had a day job, but it's most artists have a day job, even
Yeah.
many successful artists. Like they still have day jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say if you're gonna get to the end of your life and regret not trying, then you need to get started now, you know.
Yeah, that's super sound advice.
Yeah. And again, like, just put the critics out of your head, and it's none of your business what they think of you, unless they're, giving you some good advice that's not trying to tear you down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just have to go for it. If it gives you joy in your daily life, I mean, why not try?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually met you through Cathy Heller's podcast group.
Yes.
Her podcast, I've mentioned it so many times in these
Uh-huh.
interviews.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
It's
say
hard
it
not
again.
to. Yeah.
I know
Uh,
her podcast is called "Don't Keep Your Day Job,"
yeah.
and I've seen some of your posts on there about how you're kind of venturing into. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been trying to display in a gallery recently,
Oh
right?
yeah, I'm set up at Cress Emporium in downtown Asheville, North Carolina. Um,
Yeah.
that's my latest. And I have work at Taylor Gallery. I love them so much. They're awesome people. They have a salon style wall.
Ooh.
Yeah, that I'm in constantly. And then they have monthly rotating artists.
So for those at home that might not know what is a salon style wall?
It's a hanging of a lot of artists, sort of pretty tightly hung. Instead of like
Mm.
one painting and then walk a few steps, there's another something hanging. It's more like butted up next to each other, just a lot to take in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you find these opportunities?
I'm just constantly Googling and social media is how I found Taylor Gallery. I found that they were opening. So I started communicating with them pretty early. Cress, yeah, I found that on Craigslist. A woman was
Wow.
losing her uh, Cress Emporium. They have booths set up for
Mhm.
artists. So there's several artists and crafters in there, and so she needed someone to move in with her in her booth, and so that
Yeah.
um, and
That's really cool. I feel like galleries are one of those things that people are really interested in doing, but they
mhm.
just don't know how to do it.
It is intimidating because it feels like, I mean, it's hard to be judged, and like you don't want to hear no, but you just have to go for it. And I've heard a few people on like Cathy's podcast or other podcasts mention their rejection folder. Like I have one too. I'm like, the more rejections, the better, because that means you're getting closer to the next yes. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's reasonable to feel good about a 10% approval or like 10%
Oh yeah.
yeses.
Totally. For context, so I have a day job that is in e-commerce,
Uh,
and my responsibility is to see how many people that come to our web pages convert into customers.
oh,
And for those who don't have a lot of context with like being that deep into like a big company's e-commerce,
mhm.
a 1% conversion rate in some places is amazing.
Yeah. Huh.
So think about that.
Yeah.
Like if even for a big company that's making millions of dollars, having 1% of people that see a page convert is like gold.
Nice. So maybe I need to lower my standards.
No, it's not even about lowering
Uh-huh.
standards. It's like, for context,
Yeah.
that a lot of people think hearing all these no's and having like an occasional yes is bad,
Mhm.
but a yes is a yes, and that's a
Right.
success you need to celebrate.
You're going to learn something from the no's too. Like always look for what you might, discern from those no's to propel you forward.
Totally. What are some lessons you've learned through the rejections you've gotten so far?
Um, Probably something about audience, like not everybody's going to like my work. I don't need everybody to like my work. I need to find the people, I think Cathy talks about this a lot, actually.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
does.
find your people. They're out there, and you really don't need even that many um, to
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're doing what you want to do, to feel like you're getting your work out there. And yeah.
No,
um,
that's completely true. Um, there's another podcast I listen to called the Creative Pep
oh
Talk.
my gosh, that's my
Y-
favorite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, awesome.
Yes.
So, one of the things he said recently was that it's way better to have 100 really engaged fans or customers of your work
Mhm.
than having 1,000 people that only
Yeah.
passively enjoy your work.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And it's completely true because if you can have even 50 people that are super engaged fans, they're like always interacting with you on social media or through email, and they're
Mhm.
buying your prints and stuff. That is so much more valuable than having a lot of people who just passively like your art
Right.
on Instagram.
Mhm.
And I think it's a very important goal to have, to just cultivate that very engaged small following, because that's
Mhm.
really all you need. You don't need a stadium of millions
Right.
to make a living, let's say, making music. You
Mhm.
just need an audience that is willing to listen and pay for your work. And
Yes.
that's not necessarily as much as you might think you need
Mhm.
as far as the quantity of people. It's more quality, really.
Right. Yeah. And I'd say definitely start with your friends. And then, their networks. I have two
Mhm.
collectors who have really kept me going over the years.
Wow.
They are my friends to start, and then they just really genuinely like my work, and they love to support local artists in general. And just having those collectors has been amazing. And it's only two. I mean, I have other people who buy things here and there, but these two collectors, they'll buy a lot each year, which it's been amazing. And yeah, so yeah, just show people your stuff. Don't hide it. Yeah.
That's the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
People can't like you if they don't know you.
Uh-huh.
And so, what so you said that you have your stuff recently in a gallery. Do you have any plans in the works for kind of like your next moves?
Yes. So I've scheduled two shows, one for April, one for May of next year. And I'm talking to another venue about a show in the fall of next year or late summer. Um, there was sort of this aha moment several years ago when I heard this artist say, talking about some artist was bummed out that they didn't have a show that month. And he was like, well, if
Mhm.
you didn't plan it last year, I mean, that's probably why you don't have a show like coming up.
Yeah.
You need to think a year at least ahead. And so I've really expanded my calendar lately, and
Yeah.
trying to plan ahead. And yeah, it's not as daunting as it sounds, really. Um,
Yeah. So are these like personal shows, like all of your work?
well, the show in April is at Taylor Gallery. It'll be one of their
Oh,
group
okay.
shows.
Mhm.
And then I have a solo show at Odds Cafe in Asheville, and they love art. I love this. It feels like a gallery and a cafe. Um,
Yeah.
so that'll be a solo, and they have a lot of space. So I'm going to be making lots of large pieces to hopefully fill it. And it's fun to plan so far in advance because I really have no clue what's going to come out of me. It's kind of exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, because like you said, you don't know what's coming and you don't know the influences that you'll develop as time goes on. So it'll kind of be interesting for you to see the pieces you created first versus the pieces you created last.
Yeah. Mhm. Yes.
So that's a really good tip that you gave where if you're interested in, I think this is actually applicable to most things as far as our careers go, you have to really plan in advance.
Yes.
Because,
Mhm.
for example, a big season for artists is Christmas.
Right. Hmm.
You cannot expect to be successful in Christmas if
Hmm.
you have not already started planning your products in, like, September. In
Yeah.
some cases, it's
Like
kinda late.
July. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's very important to always keep your eye on whatever prizes you have your eyes set on and make sure that you have your stuff set in place in time.
Yes.
You
Exactly.
know, that's
Hmm.
for shows, be it holidays, anything you want to do,
Hmm.
you can't do without proper planning.
Right. I'd recommend artists look into editorial calendaring. If like find a magazine you love and look at their editorial calendar. They're planning, next year, maybe even 2 years ahead. And that can help you, like, especially if you want to get into magazines, that can help you plan how to communicate with them or just on your own, like what you should be thinking about throughout the year at certain times.
Yeah, that's a good tip, especially with print. These people really have to
Yeah.
have their stuff planned out well in advance. So
Mhm.
that's actually a really good tip. You can even use like past, if you're into magazines especially, you can look at past issues from past years
Mhm.
and see when do they start talking about, for example, holiday fashion. You
Mhm.
know, if whenever they start even hinting like, "Hey, do you know what you're wearing for the holidays?" You That's already a hint that you're a little close to the
Yeah.
holidays, you know? You should be planning well before that.
Right.
But yeah, that's a really good tip.
Oh, thank you. I was
Do you have any other tips that you kind of follow in your art that is slowly propelling you forward in your career? And it can be like, are you following any schedule with yourself for like when you create art? How do you like reach out to people? Do you kind of have a routine for that?
I wish I could say yes, but no. I definitely have my to-do list, which tells me all the things to keep in my brain. Fortunately, I don't have to keep it in my brain. That's a tip. Like, don't keep all this stuff in your brain. Get a good a way to track all the things you want to do.
Yeah,
Um, and then if you can have a schedule, that's great. But I find in my life it's just best for me to work on what I can and what seems to like intuitively make sense at the time for the amount of time I have or the mood I'm in.
totally.
Yeah. So I think mindset, like working on that, like the creative process is it's about your mental space um, as much as anything you put down on a surface or just be aware of like you know the voices in your head, like are they negative or positive, and like what actions you can take to increase the positivity. For me it's been listening to podcasts has greatly affected my positive voice, which is really key for me to keep going, putting one foot in front of the next. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Same. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts too because I mentioned this in a past interview, but I naturally have a mindset that skews towards pessimism.
Me too. Yes.
Yeah, which is really not great, especially when you want to pursue art because you kind of have to constantly be combating that because like you said for a career in art you really do have to try your best to be positive because in art a big game or part of the game is uh sticking to it
Yeah.
and continuing even when the going gets tough, and
Right.
that's hard to do if you don't believe in yourself. So I agree with you that podcasts are a good way to kind of exercise that because there are so many great people out there who have podcasts who are such great cheerleaders that if you
Yes.
don't have these personal cheerleaders in your life, you can pretty much enlist them through a podcast.
Right. Yeah. It's such a cool technology. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of your favorites?
Well, definitely Creative Pep Talk with Andy J. Pizza. I love
Yes.
him so much. In fact, like I don't have any tattoos, but the first tattoo, or maybe the only tattoo I'm going to get, is from one of his recent episodes. It's just going to say Art
Ooh.
Island. Did you listen to that one?
Yes.
I love it. And so that's one. And then Cathy's. Those are my staples. I'll listen to This American Life and things like that. I have so
Yeah.
many art marketing ones. I can't even recall them. The Savvy Painter. I don't listen
Ooh,
to
okay.
that one as much anymore. I think it's more for like less for illustration and sort of my style.
Okay.
But there's a lot of good tips on there. Oh, Positively Creative. I love her. She seems to get into like nitty gritty details. I really like to listen to that. I think I can't recall her name, but she is in Greenville, South Carolina, or has connection there. So she
Ooh.
interviews a lot of people from there, which is pretty close to me. It's a really neat
Yeah.
town. Um, yeah. I'll think of some more and tell you.
No, that's a good array for people to like kind of get started.
Yeah.
So do you feel like where you live is that like a creative
Oh
area?
yeah, it's a hub for artists for sure. Um, so many galleries. We have the River Arts District. I used to have a studio there, but now my studio is in my home. But anyways, like that's also where Taylor Gallery is. Lots of old warehouses down there that have been converted into studios and galleries.
Wow.
Yeah, and then downtown there's several galleries, lots of music, and yeah, we've gotten a lot of tourists lately because we were voted number one beer town in the US.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we've had a ton of breweries popping up the past few years. Um, it's been crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds so
Yeah.
cool. Do you feel like living in such a creative hub has influenced your art
Hmm. Um,
or your art making?
Probably. I'm pretty. Um, what's the word? Introverted. So for a while, I didn't really network very much with artists here, but I've changed that recently because that I think that's a really important part of an artist's career. Is you have to meet people and see what they're doing, and help them, and they'll help you. Move along. Seek out people who are 5 steps behind you and offer them advice, and likewise ahead of you in your community. I think those sort of things have helped me with my art, as well as just like taking in what people are doing, like just viewing their work, gives inspiration, and seeing that they are living here and doing the things that I want to do. Like, why can't I do that too? So it's kind
Yeah.
of a tough town to pay rent and mortgages in. So, and
Mm,
it's only been getting worse since the tourism and the
yeah.
beer stuff has come in. But
Yeah.
people are making it work. So,
Yeah, and I find it interesting what you said about like making sure to kind of take the time to help those that are, a couple steps behind you
mhm.
because I am a pretty big believer in karma
Yeah. Hmm.
and you always want to just offer some help to those who need the help from a person in your position because I'm sure we all would like to get help from someone who's ahead of us too.
Right.
But it's unfair to always, take and take without giving back to our community, especially the art community, which is so notorious for like keeping
I
secrets
know.
and
Yeah.
tips to themselves.
Hmm.
It's very notorious for that.
Yeah.
And I feel like we all have a responsibility to turn that around,
Mhm.
because the reason I feel like so many artists are struggling is because no artists are helping each other.
Yeah.
Or not really no artists, but it's kind of in the minority.
Right.
It's
Uh-huh.
very common to see, like, when young artists are asking on artists on Instagrams or YouTubes, they ask questions like, "Oh, how did you do this?" or "How did you do that?" And then they'll be like, "Well, I worked really hard to learn this, and like the best tip I have is like go figure it out yourself." And I'm
Mhm.
like, that's not A, that's not helpful, and B, that's not encouraging. The last thing we want to do is like scare people off from this industry, which is already intimidating,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
We all need to kind of do our part to lift each other up so that we can all make it to our finish line, because like
Mhm.
Cathy's always saying, there's room for everybody
Right.
in this industry and in any industry. You helping someone else get closer to their goal doesn't mean they're taking it from you,
Exactly. Yes.
you know.
And you most likely have completely different buyers, audiences, It's
Mhm.
yeah, it doesn't take a piece of your pie away. It adds, I think. Yeah.
Totally. And also, it's a form of networking.
Mhm.
You want to have as many people in your circle as you can.
Yes. Mhm.
So, I guess to start wrapping things up, I actually ask this fun question to all my guests.
Okay.
So, all artists, we tend to have these color palettes that we love to stick to, sometimes unintentionally.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But are there colors that you rarely use in your work but you love?
Hmm. Um, I think it yeah, rarely I use orange, and
Mm.
rarely do I use, like, browns or deep greens. I like really bright
Ooh.
colors, but I love all colors, like, every color.
Yeah,
Like, when I pick out wall colors, it's really hard to choose just one because they look so nice all next to each other. I
I know.
um, I think orange is sneaking in there, but it's usually mixed. I don't use it out of a tube. I
Gotcha.
might use a paint pen that's orange for some detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. And do you have any kind of final thoughts or advice to share with other people who might be in the same position as you, where you're working part-time in your art towards the goal of making it full-time?
Hmm.
Even if it is something you've already shared
Yeah,
before in the
I'm just thinking
episode.
about all the things I've said. The number one thing is like Nike, just do it. Like you have to just go towards your instincts, like whatever your intuition is telling you to
Mhm.
try right now. Don't push it aside. Don't think that it's not right, because you're not going to know if it's going to lead you to the right thing unless you try to do it. Like whether that be a style or material or a place to put your art, to show your art. Yeah, so just keep going and stay positive. You're going to have bad days, but don't let them hold you in that spot. Don't let them make you stagnant, because tomorrow's different. Like the next minute is different. Um, and learn what gets you unstuck. Like, do you need to go take a walk? Do you need to listen to a certain kind of music? Or do you need to take a break for a day or a week? Um, yeah, just learn who you are and keep going forward.
That's awesome. That's very good things for artists to keep in mind. But thank you so much for giving us your time and giving us a little peek into your current life as an artist. It was so fun talking
Oh,
to
it's my
you.
pleasure. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for looking at my art and talking with me.
Seriously, guys, I love talking to people like Nicolette, where, they're not quite, supporting themselves with art, but they're trying really hard and they're ahead of me, because it kind of lets me see like what my journey might look like in some time. I forgot to ask her to say it on the air, so I'm going to say it, but you can find her work in a couple of places. You can find her work on her website, NicoletteLeighArts.com. And you can find her on Instagram at Nicolette Leigh. Oh my God. You can find her on Instagram, Nicolette Leigh Arts. And I will have those things linked if you don't know how to spell them. It's fine. But she actually recently opened a new Instagram that is purely dedicated to her digital work, which is really cool. And that's called Early Nerd Studio. So yeah, if you want to check out her stuff, definitely check out the show notes or my website, and you're going to find all the clickable links. But let's proceed to a few of the lessons you can take away from what Nicolette told us today. Number 1, start building an audience with your friends and inner circle. These are people who already want to support you, so why don't you share your work with them? Do a little bit of work for them. And honestly, word of mouth is such a powerful way to advertise your art that they'll no doubt share your work with people they know, and those people will probably or possibly reach out to you to create work for them, and like it kind of grows from there. And it's a really non-intimidating way to start if you are feeling nervous about starting to sell your art. Number 2, don't be afraid to change your path, even if you think you're far too, far down a different path. Nicolette, as you heard, she used to be a geology major, and she was like, you know what? No, I want to do art. A lot of people, I think in that case, would be like, oh, it's too late. I already chose a different major. I can't do art anymore. But honestly, it's just never too late. If you know you want to do art, just start planning to change your course and do it. Number 3, the more no's you hear, the better. That's because this means you're closer to the next yes. And it's so true. I know it can feel very discouraging to hear no after no and rejection after rejection, but each one of those makes you stronger and it gets you closer to the next yes. And 4, plan things in advance. If you want to be in an art show in Christmas, that means you have to start planning for that in the beginning of the year. And I completely agree. You can't do anything if you don't plan on doing it. Like, yeah, there's some things you can do by the seat of your pants. Is that how that phrase goes? I don't know. But yeah, I think planning's really good. It ensures that your goals are met, So yeah, it was so good talking to her today. I feel like I learned a lot, especially since, like I said, I can relate to her as being a part-time artist. But I really hope you enjoyed this episode, guys, and thank you so much for sticking with me. I have so many nice guests coming up in the next few weeks, and I'm also planning on doing some solo episodes. What am I going to talk about without a guest? You'll see. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for listening. If you really want to support the podcast, why don't you leave us a review? It would be totally helpful because it helps the podcast get seen. And yeah, it helps me spread this message with more artists so that we can all help each other grow and progress on our paths. And if you want to subscribe, do that too. Search the Art Journey Podcast on the app you're using and hit subscribe. Now, if you want to keep up with the podcast elsewhere, follow it on Instagram at the Art Journey Pod. And you can find the show notes here on the app, but you can also find them on the website at theartjourneypodcast.com. And if you want to see my work and my stuff, you can follow me on Instagram at Alex Agosto. That's spelled ALEKSAGOSTO. And you can also find my website, alexagosto.com. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful day and week. And I will see you again next time. Bye.